Welcome, one and all, to Enlightened Conversations, where this season we're going just that little bit deeper and not skimming on the judgy surface of life. I will also be sharing conversations with my guides, and you can be guaranteed that all the topics that come through are authentic, life-changing and enlightened, because we want you to live a more joyful, peaceful and loving vibration. Let's go. Hello everyone, it's Michelle Lightworker here and welcome to another episode of Enlightened Conversations, episode 4, season 7. Can't believe we're already into the 4th episode. This season we are doing it a little bit differently. I'm sharing some intimate conversations I've had with guides, and a lot of the information came through 7 years ago that I've started with, and so we'll just work our way along, and I'm sharing like a summary or a journal entry of the conversation I had. Sometimes it followed a meditation or general questions, topics of interest. So it is a bit of higgledy-piggledy, but it's also very real and also very, how can you call it, authentic, just very authentic. So I am just double checking that I've got our timer going and we're all set to go. I'm going to commence by just giving you a little snapshot of what we're covering today. So I'm going to start just by reading this journal entry. Sometimes I add little bits in to make sense, just so that you know what I'm talking about, just in case it's really out there. And sometimes I just read what's on the page. So let's go. The 14th of August, 2018. Well, I experienced something major last night. After attending a financial advisor free consultation, I felt that I had been plugged into an energy that was a remembering of what I already knew. I was sleeping and awoke at around 3 a.m. and experienced what seemed like a conveyor belt of energy coming towards me. The energy consisted of geometrical shapes within shape masses, like a collective of energy. It kept repeating. There were a variety of the same shapes, but they were repeating in different colours. As they came at me, I felt myself reabsorb them. However, the energy felt familiar rather than foreign. I got more and more energised. I called on Ralph, my intergalactic friend, and asked him, what the hell is this? I do speak very frankly with Ralph, just for those of you who may not have heard some of our conversations. He said that I was being activated with codes from past experiences, that I had done this many lifetimes before. I had mastered the art of what he called Formfullness. That's Formfullness, Formfullness. In his world, which is completely formless, this was the opposite. Complete opposite. So just in context of those of you who don't know Ralph, he's an intergalactic being from another universe that is in complete formlessness and the last stage of conscious evolution. So they are still around, their soul is still around, but however their body is no longer, and it's not death, it's a different state of consciousness in a different energetic form. So that's the little summary. I do describe it in detail in my book, Conversations with Ralph, if you ever want to pick it up and have a gander. Anyhow, we'll go back to this. So he said I had spent many lifetimes and many varieties of galaxies mastering this, and that it was all awakening within me now, or reactivating. The programs or codes that I had created were being reabsorbed. He reminded me of the conversation that we had that light workers were not yet getting paid as much as they could at the moment, as the critical mass of conscious collective had not awakened yet. In other words, there's supply and demand thing. So where people don't need light workers, obviously they won't value light workers and pay to help them. And so he was just saying in a previous conversation we'd had that the critical mass of the collective consciousness had not yet awakened. So therefore, light workers were not getting paid as much as they could at the moment. There were many people still looking for their security in different ways, lower vibrational ways, and that light workers may be tempted to also draw their light working down to a lower vibrational manipulative energy to gain financial rewards. I think, like, I've noticed that in the last 7 years, that growing exponentially too. A lot of hustling in the light working field, and a lot of light workers focusing, probably, this is not in my journal, but just what I observed, going for helping businesses. So that's where the money is, and so helping people to create money. So like tapping into that wound to get people to get on board to pay money to make money, if you know what I mean. Anyway, getting back to this journal entry. So the lightworkers may be tempted to draw their lightworking down to a lower vibrational manipulative energy to gain financial rewards. However, that this only stagnates their own growth and expansion, although, side note here, that many need to have this happen as part of their overall process of their own resolving process. Resolving meaning resolving their wounds and reclaiming who they are authentically. So he said that the property or home that people buy is quite clean, and how that's relevant is that when we went to the financial advisor, they were talking about using property portfolio as a long-term investment strategy. So that's how that's relevant. And now back to the journal entry. So throughout the ages, that this is what people have and will always need, a home. And he said that I have known this over eons and mastered this as a stable long-term investment that also works alongside ensuring that I continue but am not dependent on my lightworking to supply my income. This made so much sense to me. Everything that led up to this point in the past couple of weeks had been nudging me in the direction of financial security, investment stability, and in no way was it connected to my lightworking. I understood that this knowledge needed to be passed on to other lightworkers so that they too were doing their good work without fear or attachment to money. And also, side note, when I got home from the financial advisor last night, I received the interior copy of the manuscript for Conversations with Ralph from the publishers. I knew that as things were getting concrete with the book, I was being financially supported to continue my good work. This was a wonderful feeling, considering I had received very little financial remuneration since letting go of conducting psychic readings at the end of 2016. It was now over 18 months later, and I had hung in there, being financially supported by my husband for what seemed like a long time to me. I just knew it was his turn to be taken care of and learn those lessons that I had had to face. That's the journal entry. And then when I was guided to share this important learning with you, this reintegration and reabsorption of codes that we've are resources from previous lifetimes of learning and of evolving and getting to a point. Sometimes we don't realize that. We will get to certain points in our journey, and we will then find ourselves just being in a state of ease and grace with our situation. And it's because we've tapped into an anchor that we've already reached at a previous point. And it's not like we're evolving isn't this thing where you learn something, then you learn something, and you learn something, which is how our brain works. We learn something, then we connect to that, and then we connect to that, and then we connect to that. And that's how our neurons work and our neural pathways grow. However, what I was being shown is that when we tap into those codes, it actually activates all of the network of that learning in our whole energetic system. And as I'm talking to you now, I'm seeing that our whole brain can change as well. And so that will also affect our genetics and our DNA, and potentially heal chronic illness and things like that along the way as well. So I'll go back to the reading of this other entry that is 11th of June 2025, 7 years, obviously almost 7 years later. And so this was the other day, and I tapped into Ralph on this subject and asked whether this had anything to do with the not enoughness wound. And this is the summary of what he said, because I kept getting this, information about the not enoughness wound, and that is when we feel that no matter what we have, it's not enough. And, we can, the rich people will, even if they have tons of money, they might also feel that it's not enough. It's not enough to feel like, you're showing your the best, in the neighbourhood, with the best cars and the fancy schools, and the paying people off for the universities for your kids so that they look good and that makes you look good. And those kind of wounds that on that other side, not just all the addiction like the heroin and the meth, and there's not enough cocaine, and there's not enough crack, and there's not enough alcohol, and there's not enough food, or not enough dieting for the anorexic. So it can work both ends of that spectrum of not enough money, I'm always poor, or not enough money, and they're rich anyway. It's this feeling of this empty hole in the soul that nothing seems to fill. And in addiction recovery, we call it like a spiritual hole or spiritual wound. And the only thing that can fill that is your connection to your spiritual higher power. So what I'm going to talk about now is the conversation I had with Ralph on this not enoughness wound, and how it connects back into that experience that I had with the formfullness reactivating in my energetic center and with the energetic codes. So I tapped into Ralph on this subject and asked whether this had had anything to do with the not enoughness wound, and this is the summary of what he said. Yes, it is, because the not enoughness is the opposite in terms of manifesting as the formfullness is to attracting enoughness. And they are both wounds on the base and occur during infancy. The closest we are to God in that feeling of enoughness happens before we are born. Once we are born, we are in trauma of lots of not enoughness. We feel hunger, cold, uncomfortable, pain, thirst, and lack of the energy of love, especially if it's not consciously offered by the baby's carer. It's like a big wound, inevitably. We cannot step into enoughness if we have these wounds. We cannot step into manifestation with ease if we have this wound operating. I asked what the best therapy was for healing this not enoughness wound, and Ralph said that without a doubt it is inner child healing. Most of the wounding is unconscious. We walk around with this wounding and don't realize how obvious it is to others. We don't realize how unconscious this behavior plays out. It can play out in our love life, our relationship with food, how much people praise us, and so many other addictions, any addiction. Until we have brought the awareness of a total loving higher power to our inner child, we only serve part of the healing. We can nurture ourselves till the cows come home, but if we are still self-reliant, we inevitably don't feel that fullness. And therefore, living abundant light, which is level 7 of the Lightworker Practitioner training that I offered in my school that I ran, and the book that I wrote, is not realized. It's interesting that I now reflect on what was happening for me back then in stepping into this formfullness with my past lives being activated. My property portfolio allowed me to retire in 2023, only 5 years after the previous entry. So yeah, that's the proof in the pudding that when we do the inner work, more opens up to us and more is provided to us to assist us in living a whole and happy life where wants don't dominate and needs are not neglected. So yes, so that is a major learning for, even me returning back to that journal entry to see that progress. And maybe that's why this is happening, to get that 7 year, goodness gracious, this is 7 years on, and look what's happened since that time. Those codes were activated, and anything can happen in 7 years, and it's from zero to hero kind of thing for me, because I was very it was the beginning of an interesting track, because I got back into the mainstream world too, and I was doing a lot of my light working and my mainstream work in HR and recruitment and supporting health professionals, and I was learning a whole other level of learning, which comes up in my journal entries too, about why I was being guided to do that. But it also enabled me to have that regular income, and then to be able to go to the bank and have a regular job and all those kind of things, to be able to prove I can pay it back and all that jazz. So yeah, it's an interesting I guess you could say, an interesting full circle moment sitting here and thinking, golly gee, I didn't even remember that I had codes activated 7 years ago, and I'm glad I kept that journal now. Well, it wasn't even a journal, it was just a conversation with Ralph that I was recording at the time, and I have all this information in a document called CWR2, Conversations with Ralph 2. So I'm sure we'll have many more learnings, but this for me feels like a real full circle moment, and I can understand that from like the other day when I tapped in again and Ralph was showing me the infant. It makes so much sense. Here we are, an infant child in our mother's belly, and here we are, comfortable, safe and sound, and all of a sudden, bang, we feel pain all of a sudden, we feel hunger, we feel thirsty, we've got a tummy ache, we've got all these things that are happening, that we're crying, we're totally reliant on our carer to support us, to make us feel better. And so of course that can be very unconscious, because we're not thinking as a baby, why is my carer not taking care of me, or anything like that. We're just traumatized by our needs not being met, and it's not even sometimes our carer's fault. They wouldn't have a clue that something's going on for us, and so then as an adult, a lot of our unconscious needs that are calling us have become habits of us trying to put that pain out, and so we may work too much, or we might want someone there all the time, or we might have our comfort foods make us feel better, and what they do is they're like, they're obviously, you've got normal addictions like put a whole blanket and numb out the pain, but you have all these other addictions, like these process addictions, that also set off this chain reaction that we don't even realize the chemicals are changing inside of us, because we have this high from getting someone looking at a certain way, or getting us a certain thing, or what have you. So what this is all about is getting back to that basic connection with our own higher power, however we feel our connection, and really feeling that is supporting the part of us who is the adult now, reparenting ourselves, that is absolutely the feeding tube for our not enoughness wounds. And when we actually have that regular realization and that regular contact, that is actually what fills those holes in our soul and those not enoughness wounds. There might be many and different types of moments in our lives that we've felt abandoned, and also call them those yin imprints that I mentioned in the previous episode. They're very hollow, very dark, and very void, like a black hole. And so that we don't disappear down them, because sometimes when we disappear down those holes, we do feel like we're in depression, and we do feel we're alone, and we're in a big, deep, dank, dark hole. And so it's about filling those up consistently, not just one-offs. You can go to a therapist and you can do the work, and you can have that person guide you through a meditation where those wounds are healed. But if you don't take responsibility for making sure you're filling those holes yourself, and you're consistently engaging in authentically getting your needs met, and not allowing your wants to overtake your needs all the time, that you've got that consistency of your relationship with your higher power, that is when your inner child at the infant age with those kind of wounds feels much more secure, much more trusting, doesn't act out, doesn't get that like compulsive feeling, I've got to have this, and doesn't feel those feelings of abandonment, and look for stand-ins for that. And I mean, I've told people, like, if you have a inner child at the age of 7 who got abandoned by her dad or a mom, that 7-year-old is at the 7-year-old age of competency, schools, being successful and those kind of things, that not enoughness wound of being abandoned and not feeling important and not feeling competent or good enough or smart enough or clever enough, beautiful enough, wise enough, funny enough, whatever it is, that'll come out in a distorted behavior as a 7-year-old, in trying to do too much with the A's, scoring the A's, be there for everybody else so that they feel like their needs are met, try to be funny all the time, so it can come out in different ways. The wound itself is very much about that little 7-year-old's inner child of infancy being abandoned, because that's the baby in that 7-year-old. And so therefore it can be complex in treating abandonment wounds. You want to make sure that you understand the age of the child that it happened to. Could happen as a teenager, and so that then it comes out differently. They don't have a sense of belonging. They want to sign up to some kind of group cult instead, because that's their sense of belonging is more important, feels that not enoughness wound at that point. So you've just got to ensure that you don't just treat within a child reparenting, you don't just treat the age of the child that it was that you experienced the trauma. You also want to go back to the infancy age to make sure that you are taking care of that infant consistently, and that infant feels that trust with you, because there's no real long-term recovery for not enoughness wounds, which is based on trust, and literally the base chakra, which is all about money, trust, safety, security, home, feeling secure in yourself, feeling that connection right down to your very base and in your bones, with feeling safe with your higher power. You can't start manifesting like with ease and celebration and not struggle if that's not really healed, because you can manifest a lot of stuff, but it will just be like through a sieve, like you get lots of stuff and then you just lose it, fill a cup and then the sieve is just running through, so you can get lots and lots and lots. Just keep coming. It just keeps coming if you're trying to manifest and you doing all your positive affirmations and all that. But in terms of holding on to it and it sustaining you, it doesn't work like that. So the formfullness stuff is literally about feeling full, and also feeling that you have the form in 3D, like in this 3D world that we live in, that is full, and you're not aching for anything. And when you need something or you want something, you can get it, but you don't need too much of it, because when you do, you notice it and you go, oh, actually I didn't need that. And it's a bit of a check into yourself. It's like, oh, that was a bit too much, or what have you, rather than, oh, it's never enough. You have the realization that, oh, I might have eaten a couple mouthfuls too much, or I might have ordered too many things online. Okay, I got excited. That kind of thing, rather than, oh, I just don't have enough. So I'm going to leave it there, because I feel like it's a good place to leave it, to give you guys that reality, and just realize, that there is healing in this not enoughness. There is reactivation of codes when you get to that point where you feel you've healed that, and you can actually then, because this happened after I realized I'd healed all my imprints. This was the following entry, so it's just really powerful that the previous entry was previous day, so the 13th. So there you go. So I'm going to leave it there, and just realize the power in healing those imprints. Amazing. It's all within you. It's also within your past and previous lives that can be activated. How awesome is that? It's not a hard slog up the mountain. It doesn't have to be. You just heal your wounds, and you can activate and call on past previous energies that you've already tapped into, already there, which is amazing. So just to think about it like that, they're just there behind that veil. You can just tap into them. How awesome. Just got to do that inner work, and voila. All right, lovelies, have a beautiful week, and I shall see you next time.